This is Regenerative Skills, the podcast helping you to learn the skills and solutions to create an abundant and connected future. I'm your host, Oliver Gaucher. New Society Publishers is your gateway to a regenerative future. They're not just about books, they're about transforming lives and communities through the power of knowledge and action. Their mission is simple: to inspire and empower individuals to create a more just, sustainable, and compassionate world. They envision a future where every person has the tools and resources they need to thrive in harmony with nature, where communities are resilient and interconnected, and where equity and justice are fundamental principles guiding our collective journey. If you subscribe right now to their newsletter at newsociety.com, you'll be the first to receive sneak peeks at new content and get discounts on upcoming title releases. You'll even get an exclusive discount code on your first purchase of books, ebooks, or audiobooks. So sign up today at newsociety.com. Hey there and welcome back, everybody. So today I want to go back to one of my favorite episodes of the last few years. And this was back at the start of the 7th season, so almost 2 years ago. I was trying out a new format as I headed out on a water retention landscape job, which this episode is going to explain in just a minute. Now, the reason why I'm choosing to re-release this episode now is because I've been covering so many aspects around the topic of water over this series, but a lot of it has been pretty theoretical. And honestly, the way that I've come to connect with the idea of rehydrating landscapes has mostly been through my work on projects in the field with farmers and the clients that I work for. So for that reason, I'm going to republish 2 episodes that I've recorded on jobs in the field. Today's will be from a ranch project in which I worked on a team from Mark Shepard's company, Restoration Agriculture Design, led by Jake Takiff. And next week, you'll come along with me and my good friend and longtime collaborator, Nick Stener, as we recap some jobs that we did out in southern Portugal earlier this year. Now, I hope that you enjoy these more diary format episodes from the field. So let's go back now to February of 2023. Maybe you can hear a little bit of noise in the background, but this is going to be a new format that I'm trying out right now. As it happens, I am sitting in the airport right now at about 5:30 in the morning on Monday, getting ready to go on a flight to Costa Rica and then cross the border over to Nicaragua. Now, before I tell you why I'm going to Nicaragua all of a sudden, there is some backstory that is required for this. So, many of you who have listened to this show are probably already acquainted with Mark Shepard and his incredible work at his farm, New Forest Farm in Wisconsin, as well as the book that he is most well known for, Restoration Agriculture, and his newer one, Water for Any Farm. Mark Shepard has been a huge inspiration for me since I started looking into permaculture and regenerative agriculture. And fortunately, he's been on this show a couple of times. I will link to some of his previous episodes, as well as the panel episode where we talked about water on farms with Zach Weiss and Nicole Masters. And that's where this connection comes in. So 2 years ago, when I was helping to organize the Climate Farming Conference, the first annual one with the company that I work with, Climate Farmers, in order to help to scale regenerative agriculture here in Europe, I was fortunate enough to reach out to Mark and convince him to attend the conference. It was a dream of mine to meet him in person, and it certainly did not disappoint. The conversations that we had, both with him and with Karen Vanek, who is one of the main coordinators of Restoration Agriculture Development, RAD, which is their contracting and design company, as well as I think Karen also runs their tree breeding program and their nursery. Anyway, between the two of them, we got along famously. I learned so much from those conversations, and, well, we stayed in contact a little bit. And about a week and a half ago, Karen reached out to me and asked me if I was available to come and help them out on a contract for a new client in Nicaragua. And, of course, it was a dream of mine to get a call like that and an opportunity to work with such a cool company that's doing such incredible work out on the land. And so, of course, I jumped at it. And I moved some things around in my schedule, and now I am flying to Nicaragua. So I'm going to do something of a journal of this contract during this episode. And actually, I got to go right now because my flight is just about to board. But I will be telling you more details as I get through my layover in Amsterdam and then over into Costa Rica before crossing the border. And we'll give you an introduction into this project and what I'm going to be doing, as well as taking you on the journey with me and our project lead, Jake, as we, offer these services and look through all of the design considerations, the observations, as well as the client relationship required to do a restoration design for the hydrological cycle of this incredible farm that we're going out to see. So I will catch you on my layover.
Je bent wel voor ongevallen verzekerd. Misschien je maar niet voor breek van jou. Maar daar is tweede. En je round.
The doors.
Fun fact, I have worked for Dutch clients in so many different countries, everywhere pretty much except for Holland. In fact, this is the first time that I am even in Holland or the Netherlands, even though it doesn't really count to just have a layover in between flights. But it's something I think about as this is the first time that I've come to this country. I'm also thinking that even though I often judge those people who walk by in airports with those little neck pillows around them, I'm kind of rethinking that position because my neck is really sore after falling asleep on that last flight. And seeing as I've got one that's about 8 hours ahead of me, I think I'm going to have to reconsider my position on this one. And well, considering all the fun stuff is going to start when I actually land in Costa Rica and then start the trek up to the farm in Nicaragua, I'll leave it here for now and I will check in once I get to much warmer and hopefully much sunnier places. Yeah, what she said. All right, one more of these things. Let's do it. All right, so I didn't record last night because I was gassed before we went to bed early. And, so I'm here with Jake, who's our team lead. Go ahead and say hi, bud.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jake.
And so we are just waiting in the lobby right now to get picked up to be taken to the border from Costa Rica to Nicaragua. And then our client is going to pick us up from there. And we're not going to get to work today, but hopefully we'll get to see the site, get established a little bit, and work is going to start tomorrow. Jake, tell me a little bit about what we're going to be doing over these next couple of days to give people a preview.
Well, we just flew in from different parts of the world, met up here in Costa Rica, and we're heading to the site today to get a first look at it. Today the goal is going to probably be just to observe the site and get to know the client a little bit, talk with the client, and learn a little bit about what the long-term goals are for the property. From there, we can start to create a plan, a design, and begin to integrate that design. So we have a bulldozer arranged with an operator. We have a couple days on site before the bulldozer shows up. So we're going to basically snap right into action, talking to the client, walking on the land, looking at topographical maps, and creating a game plan so that when that dozer shows up, we only have, I believe, 5 days on the site, and so we're going to make the most use we can of that time. Basically, find that most important master line where we can have the most effect with the least amount of earthworks and get that line cut in, and most importantly, actually be training the client as we go. So we know we can't fully accomplish the entire project in 5 days, but what we can do is get off to a really good start and teach the client what we're doing and show him how to continue with earthworks and continue the project after we leave.
Yeah, this is an important element because as I learned really quickly when I started to do designs for other people is like, if you are keeping all of this in your own head and you leave them with something that's incomplete or without an understanding of how to maintain it and I guess coax it through its natural patterns of evolution, you're asking for trouble or if not complete failure within a short period of time. So it is really a collaborative process, and we've got to make sure that they understand what the next steps are and how to complete the installation process so that this can actually succeed in the long run.
Absolutely. And not just complete, but to then be confident in maintaining the system and know how it works, and be willing to learn and grow with their system. So, as an installer for RAD, as a consultant and an installation manager, we obviously want to set our clients up with systems that fit their lifestyle, their needs, their goals as, whatever they're trying to grow or produce for their community. In this particular situation, since the client is in, another country and it requires a lot of work to come to them, we don't want to have to be making constant site visits here. It wouldn't be efficient for us to have to return to this site constantly. So yeah, one of the main goals here is to create a system that the client feels like they can take the wheel and run it smoothly and hopefully propagate it. Hopefully the system can continue growing within the community. He's already acquired one more property next to him, so we're already doing twice as much land as we originally were going to. And ideally, the neighbors catch on. There's no reason why these, terraced systems, these water management systems with the ecology couldn't just spread across that landscape with, knowing that the client is trained and capable.
And it would be really amazing to see if that starts to catch on. And, well, despite it sounding like we're in a club right now, we're just in the lobby of the hotel. Hopefully our ride gets here pretty soon, because I'm anxious to get on site and get out of these sterile environments in the airports. I'm done with these for a couple of days. But we'll check in again once we're out on the land.
Absolutely.
All right, so it's the end of a pretty long day. It took us all morning to get from the hotel where we left off a second ago out here onto site, and we spent all of the afternoon right after lunch walking this property. How was the day for you? You've been on more of these than I have.
It was a good day, very uplifting. We had our challenges at the border. They had trouble wrapping their minds around what a rotary laser level is, but
yeah, that took some explaining.
We got, thank God you had, the linguistic skills to get us through. And, I'm tired. It's been a long day, but I feel really excited about this project and inspired by our first real interaction with the client, inspired that, they really want to learn this. They want to get a grip on what they're doing on this property. It feels like a meaningful project that's going to really help them, help their community. So I'm excited to get started tomorrow.
Yeah, here in this early stage, there's just a lot of ideas flying around. Mm-hmm. It's a interesting shape of a property in that it's super long and very narrow.
Yeah.
It's just like a little strip of land right through a big pasture that leads up into some really big hills, but is really flat at the southern end. And it's fairly north-south facing, or facing, I guess, is the length of this long strip of property.
Yeah.
Which offers some interesting potential, but also some limitations, because you can't necessarily follow the contour lines kind of where they would go naturally in the landscape. You get these cutoffs where the borders of the property are. What were some of the things that you observed from what we saw today that make you think of new potential and ideas, and some things that we're going to have to work around?
Yeah, I mean, there's limitations based on the shape of the property. It's definitely long and narrow, but it's a very good, it's a good size amount of acreage. Felt like we were walking around. We definitely covered over 100 acres today in that walk. Yeah. And so even though the property is long and narrow by scale, it's still relatively wide.
Yeah.
In a way, the limitations are beneficial in that it helps us to split the project into sections.
Yeah.
If those boundaries weren't there, this would actually be a massive project, and it would be cool because all the topographical lines would be connectable, and there'd be a lot of benefits, obviously, to having no man-made, boundaries on the site. But working with it, I think it's great because we're going to have sections that we can bite off one chunk at a time.
Yeah.
It's really easy to identify at least 3 major drainage systems and to design each of them appropriately for the needs of the client, which at this point seems to be watering livestock, mainly cattle. What's interesting here is that there's like a very long, very wet season where we're confident we can charge, a good amount of large ponds. We can charge our swales. Like, we're going to get a lot of water moving through the system all summer into the fall. and come dry season, have the ability for ponds to hold water and be used for, watering livestock and also a little bit of irrigation potentially.
Yeah, actually, that was one of the things that was cool from both of our previous experiences is that, I've lived in Guatemala in the past, which is not terribly far from here. I saw a lot of things that I recognized. In fact, I felt really at home as soon as we got into the country. And, between speaking the language and seeing a lot of plants and landscape features that I recognized. And then from your experience of living and farming in Maui for a season, I was really impressed by how many trees and plants you were able to identify that you remember from the previous context of your farm. How did that kind of inform some of the ideas that you came up with from things that you recognized from the past?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of like what you said. I mean, felt really comfortable coming back to that landscape. It's obviously different in a lot of ways from the Hawaiian Islands, but, that tropical region and the plant community felt really familiar to me. Was really happy to see so many Glaracidia trees. Glaracidia has a special place in my heart as just an amazing tropical nitrogen fixer, coppice tree. And seeing it growing wild, showed me that, we could really utilize that tree. Gave me ideas how to maybe integrate coffee and cacao and other shade-tolerant, like understory trees into the Glaracidia forests on the property. And, also for getting other species, basically just getting them strongly adapted to the new property, like whether we do mac nuts or, other food-producing stuff like bananas, papayas, anything that's going to need a little, boost of organic matter to really thrive. The option to chop and drop Glaracidia is just it's an amazing thing to have on the property already in, such numbers. I mean, that was a lot of Glaracidia trees.
Yeah, they were everywhere.
Yeah.
And moringa as well.
Absolutely.
Especially in certain areas. One thing that I noticed from walking around is that though there is vegetation all over the place, I think because we are still very recently out of the rainy season, there was still enough fresh evidence of where water flows.
Yeah.
And some fairly recent erosion areas that were very easy to pick out even from a distance without having to go in and bushwhack too far, which is kind of nice. So the evidence is there, and you can see in a lot of places the level where the water got to in its peak, where the debris has piled up, but also the stark contrast. You could see how much of it was running off because it's been maybe a month since the last significant rains here, and at least the surface of the soil is quite brittle and deeply cracked, which not only indicates the heaviness of the clay, but also how quickly a turnaround like that can happen because of the heat, the strength of the sun, and I think we both noticed just how strong the winds can be today as well. So, I mean, it desiccates quite quickly. What were some other things that you kind of picked up from the observations today?
Well, what I enjoyed about that soil, which kind of reminds me of my own farm, is that it looks all brittle and cracked and dry on the top. But, you had found that piece. We were standing there together when you flipped over that piece of soil. And as dry and cracked and brittle as it was only maybe the top half an inch that was like that.
Yeah.
Right underneath that was, moist soil. And that's kind of one of the beauties of clay. Even though clay can be really hard to work with and it can be hard to get trees established in, they don't grow as fast in it as sand. It's such an incredible resource in this particular usage, because if our goal is to catch and store as much water as we can during the wet season to last as long as we can into the dry season, it's going to be so much easier with clay soil than with sand because the water retention is so much greater.
Right.
And the ability for it to hold that moisture and slowly release it to the plants and store it in the biology, it's just much greater.
Yeah.
So that gave me hope for the goals of the client, and it'll also help in getting, the pond set up and being confident that they'll actually hold water once they fill.
Right.
Instead of just all that water draining right out like they would in sandy or rocky soil. And, it also to see the plants that were thriving in that clay soil was pretty encouraging. Hardy species, but nonetheless, just to see them really adapted to that heavy clay and with no supplemental irrigation really thriving. Like the vetiver grass looked amazing, and we'll utilize that on the terraces to, help protect the new system against erosion. And then even in some areas where, he said there's that good chunk of the year where there's no rain at all, and to see papaya trees and a lot of other vegetation that you could, like perennial vegetation that you could tell was over 2 years of age. So it's been through at least 1 and maybe 2 dry seasons already with no supplemental irrigation, that there's enough water in that clay, held in that clay to get those plants through the dry season on their own.
Yeah, and that's also indicated by the well that they have on site, which is only 10 meters deep, which, I don't know what your reference to other wells are. That's really shallow for other places that I've been that can sometimes go 30, 60, 70 meters deep before they hit water. So the water table being high is also an asset, and being able to raise it up even a little bit more is going to help to bottom irrigate many of the perennial species that they're trying to get established, and probably even some deeper rooted, hopefully perennial grasslands for the fodder and the forage for the animals as well. Look, let's talk real quick about what the next steps are and what we're going into tomorrow.
Yeah, so tonight we're going to get some sleep. I think we're both exhausted from the day's travels and hiking around the property today.
I don't know about you, but you came from even colder weather than I did. I am struggling to adapt to the heat.
Oh,
today.
Yeah, no, it's balmy. It is, I don't know what the temperature really was today, but with the humidity and being in the full sun, it was definitely quite a transition from, snowy Colorado.
Yeah.
But, I'm optimistic we'll adapt in the next day or two and, gain a lot of energy just from the momentum of the project itself. We're going to meet for coffee early tomorrow morning with the client and go over some maps. Now that we've walked the property, we've identified some really important points on the land, some key points and points of interest, which we've all kind of noted. Once we hit the maps tomorrow morning, we can locate those points and start looking at the reality of what we're able to do with that water. And then we'll hit the field and, put our design to the test using laser level and survey flags. We're gonna try to mark it out, see how it looks, see how it feels, make some adjustments and prepare for when the machinery arrives.
Nice. Yeah, I'm really excited for this part. We've just been talking about kind of this endless theoretical potential at this point, and now we're going to narrow it down into something that we can start to take action on and really see some results in just a few days. So yeah, let's get some rest.
Fuck yeah. Tired.
All right, so I'm back here with Jake, and we skipped a day for good reason, because not a lot happened on the first day. We had some setbacks.
Yeah, we did our best, but there were some things we couldn't overcome on that first day. The laser level I brought with me to Nicaragua got a bump on its head during the traveling, and it was unfunctional. So, I'm going to bring it back with me, see if I can get it fixed, but no chance of having it run on this trip. The only one we could find was hours away in Managua, and when we got it delivered to the ranch, it also did not work.
Straight out of the box.
Yeah, so
What
now
are
we
the
had 2
odds?
broken laser levels.
Yeah, yours had been working like a champ for years and on tons of jobs. Just go figure, it was the one time that it was not working, and then we got one fresh out of the box with some sort of sensor issue, and it didn't work either. So we were not moving that first day.
Yesterday was kind of a wash, but, it gave us a chance to talk about plant species, rotational grazing patterns, and kind of, get to know our clients better.
Yeah.
Get to know better what their goals are, and in a way, kind of a blessing. And we got to come at today with a fresh energy, and today actually, today was a lot better than yesterday.
It was a lot better than yesterday, mostly because we did finally get a level that's working.
Correct.
It took us a while. We spent a lot of the morning, both our client and I, hunting around in Spanish, calling up ferreterias or hardware stores, both here in Nicaragua and in Costa Rica, hoping to maybe get something over to the border that we could then pick up. Anyway, it ended up getting solved, and though it took a while, we did have to order another piece of equipment from Managua, which is just under 3 hours away. we got our guy on the bulldozer started in the morning digging ponds, and that worked out quite well. The guy's quite experienced. We didn't need a whole lot of supervision. We just kind of pointed him at a spot, gave him some indications with the flags about where he needed to create some shapes and stay more or less on level. And beyond that, it was really simple.
Yeah, it was a great use of time while we waited for the laser level to be delivered to get our dozer operator running. And there's a few key points on the properties, really, natural and, hard to miss water collection basins, places that just want to be ponds naturally. And what was amazing is we eyeballed those spots, we picked them out intuitively, we knew that the ponds wanted to happen in those zones, and we flagged out where the ponds would go. The dozer operator started working on them, and as he was working on the second pond, it started to rain. It was just a beautiful blessing for us on the project, and the laser level showed up right then, and we started to put flags in the ground. And one of the really amazing things to me was how the ponds that we had dug actually, against all odds, they ended up being pretty much perfectly where we would have wanted them anyway, whether we'd had the laser level or not.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful moment to realize that we could, we were able to move on, we were able to keep on going. But once that laser level showed up, man, we started making some real moves and got a lot of flags in the ground.
Yeah, it was really interesting for me to watch you take the lead on scoping out a master line that had an interesting journey around a ridge, because I guess maybe we should tell a little of a backstory here. So the shape of the land that we're working on is large, but it's very thin and very long. And so the result of that is that many of the little watersheds that are contained within it are cut off from one another. You can't wrap a line around those without crossing borders into neighboring land. And in some cases, we can make little jumps because they're on good terms with the neighbors and it's not an issue. But the land on one side is totally off limits. And so that kind of creates some creative constraints that we need to think around. Mm-hmm. And you managed to find a really brilliant master line that curved around a ridge that they're scoping out for possibly putting a house on. And we went back and forth a couple of times, just adjusting it a little, from going perfectly on contour to having a little bit of a pitch in order to bring water from one side to another. And after those minor adjustments, we were able to connect the first pond that we had started building in the morning with only about a 2-foot drop.
Yeah, about 24 inches.
All the way to the next one. And yeah, that was really brilliant how that ended up connecting.
Yeah, and it opened up all kinds of other opportunities. Once we saw how those two ponds could be connected, the design revealed itself for the rest of that section of the project. The way we were going to parallel off of those lines, the way we were going to move that water. And that's what I love about this kind of work, is if you use the simple equations at the beginning and you understand the parameters, you understand there are the basic rules, of course, like you can't make water move uphill, you can't go through this fence line. There's things that we have to stick to.
Yep.
And as long as we stay within those rules and we give ourselves a little bit of a buffer even, it's amazing what will just reveal itself as opportunity around that.
What would you say are some of the biggest takeaways from today and what we've learned so far that you're going to bring with you?
Today, the takeaway for me was just that we're on the right track. And that's what a lot of these projects give me, but just because a lot of projects give me that doesn't mean that any project giving me that is less powerful than any other project. My takeaway today was that, yeah, we had some issues yesterday. Yes, we were tested. Things were not perfect, but we're here with good intentions. We're here with clear minds. We want to help our clients meet their goals. We want to help, hydrate this ecosystem, hydrate this landscape, and create opportunity for trees, opportunity for grazing cattle. And, my takeaway today, as I go to sleep tonight very shortly, is going to simply be that we're on the right track. I feel good about what we're doing, and I'm grateful to be able to get to do this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And after taking a dip at the end of the day in the ocean, like we've been doing each night since we got here, it's really refreshing end to long hours out in very hot terrain. One of the things that I'm kind of bringing back is, so I've been sharing a few of the photos from what we've been doing in the Discord channel, where the audience from this podcast often gets together and chats about their own projects. And one of the questions that often comes up, especially since you can't really tell from the photos, is, how do you store water when it looks like the soil is kind of sandy and, there's a lot that you can't tell from those images. One thing that here on the ground you can definitely tell is just how heavy the clay that we're working with is.
Oh, yeah.
Even in areas where there is a lot of organic matter and there's a significant difference in the color, it's very, very dark and clearly is quite rich too. The other thing is, when you're walking over it, even though it's been dry for a while and some of it has been kind of crumbled over and sealed, there are massive cleavages in this soil. It's not like most of the cracked capping clay that I've seen in other places. I mean,
Right.
some of these go down, I would say 2 feet from what I've seen. Like, there's big openings down in the earth there. This is some of the heaviest clay that I've come across on the jobs that I've worked. And the advantage to that in holding water is that it seals really well. And we don't have to take some of the precautions that I've been taught to do in other places, where you have to key in a dam or you have to extra compact certain layers. We can be a little, I don't want to say careless, but like, we don't have to go through so many of the steps that are required when you're working with less permeable material. And that said, there's also nothing wrong if water infiltrates into the ground in your ponds. If it doesn't hold water for a really long time, that's not a bad thing. And it's also not something that you should, I guess, tether your idea of success to. If you're putting water into the soil and holding it into, like, creating opportunities for biological life and just preventing it from escaping as runoff and taking material with it, that in itself is a success. And I think that's one of the most common things that I end up talking with others about. It's like, oh, well, it doesn't, the pond doesn't stay full, or it starts to drain, or it's leaking, it's losing water. It does not necessarily mean that it's leaking, right? It's infiltrating, and those two things are very different. Yeah. So I guess that's one of my learnings from this site, and obviously we're not really going to be here for it to fill, because we are at the very beginning of the dry season. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how this evolves. And I guess another thing to have in mind too is that, as you've repeated to the clients here, the first couple of years are probably when it's going to be the most permeable. Sometimes it takes a while for the pressure of the water to compact the layers down below, for biology to move in and start to glay or seal off those layers, or in some cases for the groundwater to recharge enough so that it doesn't start to I guess, infiltrate or percolate down nearly as much because it's become higher. So that's another thing to have in mind, especially when you're installing these new features, is that there's an adjustment period, and it takes a while for them to reach a homeostasis, both with biology and with kind of compaction in the geology as well.
And that's something we have to explain to clients often, is like part of the RAD system, the restoration agriculture system. It's not that the goal is not to have ponds that stay full all the time.
Yeah.
That might be your goal, but it might not also be a reality. The reality is that in this region specifically, there's a wet season and a dry season. And during the wet season, they have an obscene amount of rain, more than they could ever utilize, and it saturates the landscape. So how can we take that water from these oversaturated areas of their land and gently transport it to the areas that are going to be the driest and the most brittle during their dry season, and get the most out of it? And, as Mark always says, really spread it out and slow it down and soak it into the landscape, and charge these hillsides, these knolls, which are so fun to wrap around and then curving back through the valleys. The topography is just,
there's some really cool
joy
topography
to work
here.
with.
Yeah,
it's really fun.
It's challenging. It's inspiring, and it offers so many opportunities to, in contrast to some flatter places or some more like jagged and rocky places, which just don't offer the opportunity to cut and make features into them too. So yeah, this is a really fun project, and I guess tomorrow is going to be the first full day with the laser level, and I think we're going to make a ton of progress.
Yeah, and we'll be running the laser. We'll be checking the berms, the dams on those ponds we just built, making sure that, you know, the spillways and the discharges, everything is how we want it, that the berms are even and level, and also be you know, starting the paralleled system, the process of marking parallel contour lines that will be cut into swales coming off of these master lines we put in today.
And a quick reminder, if any of the terms of what we're talking about are not bringing an image to mind, or you're having trouble connecting with or understanding them, I have released some of the pictures on the show notes by the time this comes out, and hopefully on the Instagram account, which I'll tag Jake in too, because he's been doing some incredible projects for a long time. Plus his farm is awesome. So I'm sure I'll repeat this again, but just to make sure that it's said here, if you want to have some visuals to go along with what we're talking about, I've been taking extensive pictures and hopefully some videos too that I'll have a chance to publish by the time this comes out. But I think we'll leave it there for this evening. It's been a long day. I'm ready to get some rest, and we'll check in again after tomorrow.
We're sure good at doing this when we're exhausted after a full day out in the field.
We got to do this sometime when we've got some more energy.
Hit it after coffee one day, at least one day.
Yeah, in the morning. That would be good too. All right, we'll check in again soon. All right, Jake, here we are again. This would have been day 3 of our work, our project here, had it not been for the day that we lost because of the malfunctioning equipment. But today we really seem to have hit our stride. Give me a little rundown about what we accomplished.
You know, today we just started cruising. I felt like we all just hit a point where we were blessed to have enough people on this small crew that we could kind of split up tasks. We had the bulldozer running, digging ponds, and also carving out our first swales today. We're blessed with an amazing operator, a local Nicaraguan guy who's just crushing it.
Yeah.
I mean, digging the most beautiful swales. He's really good at it. He understands the concept, and a lot of the time when you get a new operator, it's really difficult to explain to them what we're looking for on these systems. And the fact that he picked it up right away, he's making nice deep swales, beautiful berms, compacting them down, and leaving a nice clean product. It's making our job really easy today.
That's right. Don Julio Lopez is kicking ass.
Yeah.
Really nice guy too. I've been kind of the main point of contact with him since I speak Spanish, and it's been really fun to work closely with a large machine. It's something that I didn't have experience with before or now. It's always been kind of smaller equipment because there have been smaller projects, and seeing the difference about not only how much work can get done with that kind of horsepower, but some of the intricacies in its lack of mobility and dexterity compared to some smaller stuff, and how I need to kind of consider and think about that. I mean, obviously he handles his machine just fine. He has over 20 years of experience, this guy. But in paying attention to how it's following a design that he's not installed before. I mean, he's installed features, but he's admitted that this is something new that he hasn't done before, which is cool. It's a learning experience for all of us. Yeah. And then so you kind of blasted ahead while I was working with the machine and got in quite a few other lines. Tell me about some things that emerged from the design today.
It's just such a fascinating property for how narrow the actual property is, how much we're able to still move the water and keep the water on the property. You know, being the goal to hydrate the landscape, especially the dry ridges, which are south-facing and prone to really high winds, which is the remedy for drying out fast.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see the opportunities, how all these ridges connect into a valley, and we can't always get a nice one clean line to make it happen because of how narrow the property is, but by moving the water high up on the landscape, dropping it down and picking it up and sweeping it around again, we can really manipulate the course of that water with the goal of hydrating those hillsides. And the client couldn't be happier and is really excited about the aspects of, growing everything from fruit trees and nut trees to just pasture for running cattle, raising beef, and the idea of having green grass into his dry season potentially is really what's getting him excited right now.
And there's also been a lot going on outside of just, the work that's being accomplished on the site. We've been having long conversations after hours when we go and get our dinner and, have an end of the day beer about animal management and agroforestry options. And I mean, we had a long conversation just now before coming back to the hotel for the day about considerations for where to put roads and access ways and how that fits in with these water features and is actually enhanced by them, as well as the fact that there is one main road that cuts through the entire property that's the main access to get through and beyond to other properties, which they can't change. It's a legal road and it can't be altered because of rights of way, and the challenges and the opportunities that that presents, because it does kind of violently cut through a lot of the topography, and unmanaged can become more of a drain on the landscape because it is in contrast to a lot of this slowing down and spreading that the features we're putting in right now are designed for. And so thinking about the disadvantages of not being able to work with it, but also the creative opportunities, much like the constraint of the narrow aspect of this property, but also the creative constraint of working with a road feature that we can't alter, and how we can still make sure that at the very least we're mitigating the damage that it would do, but also the possibility for using it as a positive feature when that exists as well. It's a cool puzzle. I'm really enjoying not only the fact that every one of these projects is different, but since we're going through extra lengths right now to explain these with the guys who are out on site, because they're highly motivated to learn and hopefully even be able to either expand this project for quite a ways to come, but also probably offer this knowledge to some of their peers and people in the community so that this can happen without necessarily having us or anybody else having to come down and guide them.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things, and what caught my attention the most about RAD early on in working with Mark Shepard is that this information, it's not being withheld. The goal isn't to mysteriously show up and install a system and leave and there be this like cloud of mystery around it. What we're doing is something we want to see more of in the world. We truly believe this is what's going to, potentially create, drought. It's going to drought-proof our agricultural systems.
Yeah.
It's going to provide food security, and it's all, not to mention the lifestyle around it as well.
Absolutely.
And so to see these clients so excited about the system, and not only that, but wanting to learn it, take it in, utilize the tools. They're running the laser levels. They're trying to assert themselves into every part of the project to really get it dialed. To me, this is why I originally was drawn to this type of work with RAD in the first place. Is we want regional experts. We want people who can step up, be inspired and motivated in their region to make a difference and improve the local food systems. And to see these guys, the way they've taken this on and adapted to it, learned it, and even when they're confused, not afraid to ask questions. And we've had such great conversations, troubleshooting all aspects of this project, everything from the earthworks, the earthworks and hydrology, to the silvopasture and animal management, to the plant species and agroforestry system. They're all in. And so it's encouraging to me. I want them to take the wheel. We're going to do everything we can to get them off to a good start.
So what's coming up tomorrow? What are we going to aim for, and what do we need to prepare?
Tomorrow we've got more lines to cut in. We've been trying to stay ahead of our dozer operator because of that hiccup we had early on where we were without proper tools. We got behind by a day. So the dozer is kind of on our tail. We're not wanting to keep him sitting in his machine not working. So tomorrow we're going to be continuing to do layout, getting flags in the ground, marking the way that we're going to convey water across the landscape, stay ahead of him so he can come behind us and be cutting in these lines. And we already got ahead of him today pretty well, and so we're going to continue just to kind of work hard to continue working our way down through the whole system and keep the driver on track, keep the dozer running, and keep the earthwork install in motion, and keep the momentum around that.
Yeah, with the overall goal of not necessarily finishing this system, because there's a lot of areas of the property that are still difficult to get to at this point and are not high priority at the moment, but getting in the mainframe design and at least going through it with them enough times that they get the practice, and we troubleshoot anything that could be tricky so that they can continue on. And, you know, if they need remote help, we can always offer that as well. But the most important stuff, hopefully, will get finished before the end of our time here.
And that's why we're really focusing right now on prioritizing the master lines, the engineered lines. We really want to make sure we leave them with the tricky and the difficult layout aspects complete. And that way, not only do they get that installed and done and not have to worry about it, but they also got to be part of doing that with us. So it was a learning experience for them. One thing we're going to hop in tomorrow is parallels. Now that we've gotten most of our master lines laid out and engineered, and we're happy with where they're laid out on the landscape, we can move on to working with the area in between. And that area in between is going to be a parallel system. We have a gentle enough topography in some areas we can pull off, keeping really even alley widths throughout the system all the way down. It's not going to work everywhere on the land, especially in steep areas with really abnormal, ridge formations and things that we wouldn't be able to get far enough in a parallel system to make it worth it.
Yeah.
It's too sporadic, the topography. But as we get lower on the property, we find these really beautiful sweeping hillsides that gently almost turn into bottomlands, areas that are wetter and flatter. So to run a parallel system in there, create a rotational grazing pattern for the cattle with those parallel swales and the alleys between, and then to basically take that moisture and spread it out evenly across the landscape, we're going to accomplish a lot of the goals.
Well, I don't know about you, but I am extremely tired at this point. It was a really hot day, and there was really, really high winds. It has a way of just taking your energy out.
I ate a lot of dust today.
Yeah, me too. Oh my goodness, following the bulldozer as it was kicking up dust in front of me and just having a whip in my face, that was rough. I've gotten to the point, especially because I got pretty sunburned the first day, that I am like fully covered in a long sleeve shirt. I've got a bandana tucked underneath my baseball cap. I'm like trying to shield myself from the sun as best as possible. I don't know about you, but that heat coming from freezing cold where I was, where we actually got some snow the night that I left, to full-on tropical heat in the dry season, it's been an adjustment. That's been probably the biggest challenge so far. I think well, I guess once we got our equipment, that was actually a bigger challenge. But now it's a matter of just like staying healthy, keeping our energy levels up, making sure we, kind of respond appropriately to the weather and stuff, and kind of use that to moderate our pace. But everything else is looking really good.
I'd say we're on track.
All right, let's get some rest and get this going again tomorrow.
Heck yeah.
All right, end of another day. Jake, how did this one go? It cut a little bit short.
It wasn't what we were expecting. The bulldozer broke down, but at this stage in the project, we're just rolling with the punches. We really got a lot of motivation out of the way this project started. It was a slow start. We had issues, and we, have just been working really hard to make up for lost time. And so now with this bulldozer breaking down, it's really not going to stop us. We're just going to keep on, putting flags in the ground, laying out the design, and the client at this point is confident and able to, oversee the actual installation with the bulldozer when it gets repaired. So,
yeah, that's one of the things that I was working with Rodrigo on today, was guiding the first cuts from the bulldozer to make sure that they properly follow the line, that they take an angle, and then guide them into shaping the different options for terraces that you want, and kind of the considerations for order, getting rid of vegetation first, kicking it off to a safe place, and then starting to cut in a comfortable track for the bulldozer so it can work safely, because on certain levels or grades, it gets kind of dicey about whether it could tip over or not, and so you need to kind of make it a safe workspace first. It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, and we definitely got onto steep terrain today, the steepest we've gotten onto yet.
Yep. There was an area we just decided not to go through with.
Yeah, we
kind of closer inspection.
We had one area that we were hoping we could mark out and have the operator, terrace for us, but upon inspecting it, I mean, it just really became clear it was not going to be safe. And so we adapted to that and still utilized the valley structure, but were unable to basically connect it in with the rest of the system. And it was a minor it wasn't even a setback, I'd
Well,
say.
that's the thing is, whenever you're evaluating something like this, there comes a point where you have to ask yourself whether the amount of energy or risk is worth what you would gain by doing it. And it was, maybe a couple hundred yards, a couple hundred meters worth of extra extension on a terrace. And that wasn't worth, what could possibly be lost in time or in a breakdown with the machine in forcing it to work. So
absolutely, and I mean, the machine could have done it. It just would have taken them so long.
Yeah.
It would have not been worth it for the client for what they would have gained.
Yeah, because, renting these machines is expensive, and that's in any part of the world. And so you need to make some pragmatic decisions about where to use its time effectively and the amount of gain that you're going to be rewarded for. And there's just easier spots that we needed to catch up on, so we skipped that part.
And instead of trying to connect that system in with that drainage in with the rest of the system, instead we took a different approach. The valley formation there, the drainage itself is like very steep. You can see massive erosion. You can actually see lava rock and like pretty deep channels cut through that center.
Yeah.
And so instead of trying to cut in swales, all we did in there was create dams. So as the water comes rushing down that drainage, it'll hit the first dam, backfill into the channel it was coming down. It'll just take all that momentum out of that water, cure that zone of erosion, and when that pond does overflow, it'll flow into the next pond down. So we did a total of 4 ponds in that drainage.
Yep.
Not with the goal of catching the water and sending it across the landscape, but just with the goal of catching it, slowing it down, and forcing it to soak in right where it is and backfill those channels rather than sending it on contour.
Yeah. And then, so like you said before, we got served a curveball just before lunchtime when the bulldozer broke a belt. And since it's Saturday afternoon right now, and most people here don't work on Sunday, we're just going to have to wait for the mechanic to come out and fix it on Monday morning. But by then, we'll have had to leave. So
we'll be long gone.
Yeah. And since we were already quite far ahead of the bulldozer, we just decided to call it a half day because what we have predicted for tomorrow, we have more than enough time to complete. And yeah, we just decided to take advantage of a little opportunity to rest. I took a nap.
Yeah, it was nice to take a little breather. I got to have a cold beer, look out at the ocean, and just take a step back and gain some perspective on the project. And that's always nice to do when you're out there in the hot sun, dehydrated, and like the machine's running and the laser level is spinning and you're getting beeped at, and you're just very much in the zone. And I love that feeling.
Yep.
But then there's something about taking a step back, clearing your mind, having a new perspective, and then it helps to the ways to consider the project, how to reapproach the project when we go back tomorrow, and just do our best for our clients here.
Yeah, and sometimes it can depend on the length of a project. If you build in weekends for longer projects, you kind of get those anyway. And I still like to spend time on the site and kind of look at it without this go attitude, because this is a pretty fast-paced thing where you jump in, you're walking all day, you're looking at all kinds of features, and then we had a machine waiting for us, and obviously we got a little bit of a slower start up until now, but things really hit the gas over the last couple of days, and we're not here for a full week, so there's not a weekend built in, so just having an afternoon was really helpful for me.
And I'm excited to really look at what we accomplished. Like, I think by tomorrow, once we get everything flagged out, we'll be able to translate what we did out in the field onto our map, measure the linear feet, actually get to, estimate how many trees the system is going to support on the swales, how much room there is in the alleys for other alley crops and silvopasture, and get a really cool view of what we just accomplished and how we just set the client up.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty excited to get to that point and see, basically what kind of potential we just unlocked, and how much. My favorite is just how many linear feet we actually installed
Yeah.
of water management, because that's the course the water now has to take in order to leave the property. Whereas it used to be, a quick direct route right down that eroded gulch. Now we're bouncing that water back and forth across the landscape, soaking it in, spreading it out. And when we see how many linear feet it actually has to travel to leave, it'll, that, to me, that's one of my favorite measurements to take.
Yeah. And at the same time, we're very early in the overall development of this site. This is a big initial intervention, but it's going to evolve, and it's going to express itself differently during different seasons.
Yeah.
Hopefully after the next 1 or 2 years, these ponds are really going to start to hold water for a significant period of time, which is going to make a huge difference in the ecosystem of this place. And, I can only imagine what it's going to start to look like. I don't have the same reference to the tropical cultivation methods that we've been talking about. They're still not 100% sure about the enterprises that they're going to kick off. There's a lot of options. It's been a huge portion of what we've been talking about in off hours.
Yeah.
And, this afternoon was another great opportunity to understand the guys that we're working with right now and what some of their preferences are, what some of their passions are, and help to guide that towards some decisions on how they might enter into maybe the business aspect or maybe the lifestyle aspect of this that's really going to get them towards what they want to experience on this, because they're living here too. In some cases, farms are, off-site, or people live in town and they go to their farm during the day. It's a whole nother experience from my work with clients in thinking of it as a home rather than just a workspace. And it's really interesting to see their take on it and how these might develop.
Yeah, and they really treat that place like a home, even though they don't live there yet. The plan is to build there and move onto the land. But you can tell the first thing when you drive in, it's not just ranch land. It's not just a farm. They've really put a lot of effort into making when you first drive onto the property, it's a very landscaped, very welcoming arrangement of, beautiful, edible, and also just enjoyable plants.
Yeah.
The grass is green. You feel like there's a real sense of abundance, and a lot of that actually comes from the way they take care of that zone 1, the way they make the compost and spray it. They give a lot of attention to that area there, so everything looks really beautiful and vibrant and strong. And what I'm excited to help them do is just spread that to the rest of their land.
Very cool. Well, it's getting late. We got another big full day tomorrow, and then we're going to be rushing out far too soon, but these things come to a close.
Yeah.
So let's get some rest and check in again tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow we'll bust out some parallels.
Nice. All right, here's a fun update. We are in the back of a taxi. We just crossed over the border from Nicaragua into Costa Rica, back on the way to our flights back home. We didn't do our check-in last night because, well, it was the last day of work, and so we decided to have a little party with the clients, and that went a little bit late, and then we had to pack. So it's probably even best that we're doing this check-in now so that we're not so tired. Jake, how are you feeling after the end of this job?
Feeling good. I'm happy that we're, to me, like, to leave with happy clients, feel really good about the work we did, and know that I'm on my way home, get to see my family. I feel like we accomplished what we set out to do, and went above and beyond. We really gave everything we had for this, so I feel satisfied with our work. I'm excited to get back to my family.
Yeah, I can imagine. Me too, but we definitely fielded a few curveballs on this one, between the laser level not working and then the bulldozer breaking down. I got some messages just now from the bulldozer operator that they're fixing it as we speak, and hopefully they're even up and running now, since it took us a painful amount of time to get through customs. We really had difficulty dealing with a laser level. I think like they'd never seen the machine before and just didn't have a category for it, and it took us like an hour and a half longer just to get that machine through and do the paperwork for it. So little tip for anybody else trying to come down to Latin America with their own rig: get it sent ahead of time or buy one in the country. It will save you a lot of time.
Yeah, taking everything into account, the damage that my laser level sustained in travel, combined with the pain it was to get it through customs, I would not recommend.
Yeah, a little learning experience for all of us here. So what are kind of the final takeaways, learnings, things that you're left with after this job? Because you have a lot more experience doing this kind of stuff and more comparison for other similar contracts, and this is pretty new for me, at least working on this scale. How would you say this kind of compares to some of the other jobs that you've done?
It's such a hard question to answer in some ways, but I mean, how would compare to other projects? I mean, this project had highs and lows. I mean, we had a whole day of downtime where we were just waiting for equipment to be up to our standards. We had, once we had the correct equipment, the way we shot back from that and made up for lost time was a real high. We accomplished all the goals of the client, and then some. We have their whole system marked out, flagged out, and now all they have to do is oversee the installation with the bulldozer. So they're happy. The land itself, kind of like the project, had a big diversity of, microclimates and different areas, very different water tables in different parts of the property. In some areas we had, really poor red clay that you could tell had almost no organic matter in it whatsoever, up on the ridges where there's no water being retained. And then down in the valleys, we'd see this rich black soil. It was heavy clay, but you could tell there was a lot of organic matter, a lot of decomposed plant material mixed in with that soil. And seeing that gave us a lot of hope, knowing that by spreading that moisture out onto the ridges and soaking it in, we could see that kind of improvement, across the whole landscape. So I feel really, how it would compare to other projects, to me, this was like a home run. Being able to see that contrast in the soil types, contrast in the moisture content across the landscape, and then knowing what we're doing, just spreading that out, how powerful that's going to be for their land.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we've been talking about throughout this is that this project was unique in that it was essentially a private workshop. Mm-hmm. Every single day we were teaching, we were guiding, with the hopes that this team of guys can take the project on and see it through beyond the timeline that we have to be out here. And I think that's something that, with you taking the lead, we really accomplished. There were times when they were shadowing us doing layout. There were other times when I was showing them how to, mark out flags with the bulldozer following. And on the last day, one of the neighbors who's also got kind of a stake in the project, they're combining their adjacent plots of land. I went with him out onto one of the hills where he's thinking about potentially building a house, and we marked out the start of a spiral, but we kind of got stopped as we started to get into the jungle, and poor guy was not wearing long sleeves or long pants. And there was some sort of plant in there. We didn't identify it, but it was full of little stinging needles, and the poor guy almost went into shock and had to go back home and shower and clean off. So that's another learning from this, is wear good protective clothes when you're bushwhacking through the jungle.
Boots, long pants, long sleeve shirt, hat has been my uniform, and I'm very happy with how it performed.
Yeah, same. I was covered up the whole time too. It's not super comfortable when it comes to ventilation and keeping the heat away, but it more than makes up for it, for the protection from the sun and from all the stinging plants and just, the little stuff that pokes you and makes it uncomfortable. It's worth it to be properly protected out in the field. But yeah, so wrapping up this sort of like a workshop, and I'm feeling really confident that these gentlemen are going to take this into really new heights. There are a few kind of far out areas of the property that we didn't really get into doing layout, but it's because they're low priority, they're difficult to access. It might not even be practical to bring machinery in there, but these guys can develop that over time with what they've learned here and expand on the system that we've marked out and gotten a really good start in actually installing.
And in those areas of the farm where machinery access is going to be nearly impossible, and even if we could get a bulldozer back there, it wouldn't be reasonable. Very steep, very kind of wild jungle terrain on a lot of that back acreage. And so I was really happy how quickly the clients picked up on our methods. They understand how to run the laser level, run parallels off of our master line. They understand all these basics now, have all the tools they need. And instead of earthworks on that back acreage, they're going to most likely plant, timber crops and kind of, set and forget kind of crops, long-term investment trees, and they're going to plant them all on contour with vetiver grass and other shrubs. And that way they are still contour farming the back acreage. They are still creating the strength of a contour line, but in vegetation instead of in earthworks. And so I'm excited to see how they contour farm that back acreage, how those plantings go, what trees they end up choosing, and how that really fills in and looks in a few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And to their credit as well, they've been doing a lot of research and learning for months ahead of this happening. So they were really up to speed and could keep up with us this entire time. I think that was probably a really good investment on their part. And on top of that, we were able to talk really in depth about the planting potential, the farm enterprise potential, the ecological restoration potential, and all of these things that they could consider moving forward and deciding how to evolve this project further. So, yeah, super successful, really great way to start. I'm really looking forward to more collaborations with you in the future. And I tell you what, the next step we got to do is do a full interview about your farm and everything that you've developed out there, because I've been learning a bit. I've been following you on Instagram for a number of years. I actually didn't realize it was going to be you coming out here since I followed you for a while. That was a bit serendipitous. So there's still a lot of ways that we're going to take this on and kind of nurture the relationships that came out of this. We've been talking about running workshops in the past down here as really good examples for what can be accomplished with these water systems in tropical ecologies. Maybe even get Mark down here to lead a workshop and make it available as translation in Spanish as well. There's quite a few things that are going to evolve from this on a personal level as well.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see where it all goes, and it's been amazing working with you. It's been awesome to develop a relationship and, talk about ideas for the future and just see, how we can all work together towards this goal that's bigger than all of us, which is, providing ecological refugia along with, food security for our local communities and how that can go hand in hand. It doesn't have to be separate.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for anybody who's really enjoyed listening to this journey on how we designed and executed an installation in a place like this, by all means reach out. Both Jake and I both do kind of private contracting work. We also work through restoration agriculture development, and just depending on what it is that is needed from the clients, we can adapt. We can bring a crew or a team together if that's what's called for, or we can just give small select and dedicated services if that's what's appropriate as well. So I really encourage anybody to reach out. I will also put all of the links for our own businesses, our own social media accounts, and how to get in touch with the team at RAD as well. So there's every opportunity to hopefully collaborate with some of you listeners as well.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, until next time. So there you have it, everybody. I really hope that you enjoyed this new format. I am hanging out in the Liberia airport right now because my flight was delayed. In fact, I think I'm actually going to miss my connection in Amsterdam going back to Barcelona. It's a whole show. But goodness knows I've got extra time now. So if this is something that's interesting to you, you would like to come along with me for the jobs that I'm doing, I've got a lot more coming up. And not just installations and designs like this, but I've got farm visits, I've got conferences and workshops that I'm going to be teaching. This year is looking pretty jam-packed, and that's when I'm away from the farm. Goodness knows there's plenty of projects and considerations for how I'm developing my own site that I would love to bring you along for. So please reach out and let me know if this is interesting, if I can do this any better. It's very new for me as well. And I look forward to developing this and learning alongside all of you. So I'll see you on the next one. And up until then, by all means, join me and the rest of the members from the Regenerative Skills community on our Discord server. You can get the link either through our bio on Instagram or through the link on the homepage of the website at regenerativeskills.com. I'll see you there. And of course, some things are still going to stay the same, even though I'm going to make all these changes with the format and try some experiments on the show now. Don't forget to keep taking those little steps every day towards a regenerative future, and I'll be right by your side along the way.